How does a single phrase coined somewhat offhandedly back in February of 2025 completely upend an entire global labor market?
It's wild to think about, really. Just one phrase.
Right. I mean, that is the core mystery we are unpacking today. The phrase was vibe coding.
Coined by OpenAI co-founder Andrej Karpathy, yeah.
Exactly. He tweeted this profound little realization about his workflow, saying, "I just fully immerse myself in the vibe, look at the errors, but don't really understand them. I just keep the desired output in my head."
Yeah.
And in that one moment, he essentially accidentally described the total evaporation of the traditional software engineering career ladder.
It is a brilliant distillation of a paradigm shift that has just moved faster than almost anyone predicted.
Oh, absolutely.
Because we aren't just talking about robots writing code a little faster.
Yeah.
So developers can go home at 5 p.m.
Right.
We're talking about a fundamental rewiring of how humans create digital infrastructure.
Mm-hmm.
And unfortunately, the structural collapse of the entry-level developer role as a direct result.
Yeah. So if you are listening to this right now and, maybe wondering if your computer science degree or that coding boot camp you took is suddenly obsolete, well, you are definitely in the right place.
Absolutely.
Today, we are digging deep into the era of vibe coding. We're going to synthesize the internal corporate memos, the hard labor data, the big tech earnings reports, and honestly, the rather panicked developer forums from this past fiscal cycle.
There's been a lot of panning for sure.
So tons of it. But our mission is to figure out what you actually need to know to survive this new tech landscape.
Because surviving this landscape, it really requires understanding the mechanics of what has actually changed. For decades, the traditional developer was essentially an author. If you were building an application, you had to know the grammar, the syntax, where every single semicolon belonged.
Yeah, if you missed one comma, the whole thing breaks.
Exactly. You were constrained by your physical ability to type and your rote memorization of language rules.
It makes me think of, like, building a house. For hundreds of years, if you wanted a house, you pictured the physical act of it. Someone laying bricks one by one, mixing mortar, sweating out in the sun.
Very meticulous.
Right. It's manual labor that takes years to master. But
Yeah.
vibe coding is it's like standing in an empty lot, pointing a laser pointer at the ground, and just describing the house out loud.
Yeah.
You just say, give me 2 stories, Victorian style, with a wraparound porch.
Yeah.
And a swarm of autonomous drones swoops in and builds it perfectly in 20 minutes.
That's a great way to look at it.
You didn't lay a single brick. You just, provided the vibe.
Right. The transition you're describing is the shift from manual execution to intent-based direction. I like to think of a film set.
Oh, okay.
The traditional junior developer was the camera operator. They had to hold the heavy equipment, pull the focus, manage the technical execution of the shot.
Makes sense.
But vibe coding turns the human into the director.
Ah, I see.
A director doesn't need to physically touch the camera. They just need to know exactly what the scene should look like, communicate that vision clearly, and crucially, possess the critical eye to know when a take is bad.
Right. They have to know what good looks like.
Exactly. The AI handles the how, while the human dictates the what.
And the tools acting as these, autonomous camera operators are operating at a scale that is just hard to wrap your head around.
It really is.
Take Cursor, for example. This thing hit $2 billion in annual recurring revenue almost overnight.
It was incredibly fast.
And now it's used by over 50% of the Fortune 500.
But it's not just a fancy autocomplete, right? Like the way it works under the hood is what's terrifyingly impressive. Can you break down that landscape a bit?
Yeah, sure. So the mechanism driving Cursor's dominance is its holistic context window.
Okay.
Older coding assistants, they would just look at the specific file you had open and try to guess the next line, sort of like predictive text on your phone.
Right, like when I'm texting my mom and it guesses the next word. Exactly. But Cursor ingests the entire repository. It uses something called retrieval augmented generation to map the dependencies across thousands of files simultaneously.
Wow, thousands of files.
All at once. So if you change a variable in your database schema, the AI inherently understands how that cascades through your back-end logic, your API endpoints, your front-end interfaces, and it just updates them all.
That is wild. It is the environment itself.
Yeah, it becomes the whole ecosystem.
And then you've got V0 by Vercel, which has basically completely collapsed the distance between a designer's brain and a functional user interface.
Oh, V0 is a designer's dream.
Right. You just type in a text prompt, and within minutes, it spits out perfectly clean modular React code.
It's remarkably clean code, too.
But the tool that truly broke my brain while we were researching this deep dive is Lovable.
Ah, yes. The Swedish unicorn.
The Swedish startup that hit a $1 billion valuation so fast it's making heads spin. It's entirely browser-based, requiring zero prior coding experience to use.
None at all.
But here is the mechanism that fascinated me. The founders of Lovable used Lovable to build the next versions of Lovable itself.
Yeah, it's recursive vibe coding. Meta creation.
Meta creation. So the AI is acting as its own senior engineer and its own pull request reviewer.
Basically, yes.
How does that even work practically? Like, how does an AI prompt itself to update its own massive code base?
Well, it creates this continuous automated feedback loop. The system is designed to read its current state, identify bugs or missing features based on, a very high-level human prompt.
Okay.
Then it generates the new components, runs automated testing suites against its own new code,
Oh.
and if the tests pass, it merges the changes.
So it's checking its own homework.
Exactly. The human developer is essentially just watching a terminal output, approving the strategic direction rather than writing the logic. We are seeing non-technical founders spin up fully functional, full-stack web applications over a single weekend using this exact recursive loop.
Which brings up a massive flashing red flag for me.
I think I know where you're going with this.
If I, someone who has literally not written a line of production code in my life, can build a secure, full-stack application on Lovable in 48 hours.
Wait, why on earth would a company hire a beginner?
Right.
Like, what is the financial justification for employing a human junior developer anymore?
That is the exact friction point every chief technology officer hit in 2025. The short answer is the justification is gone.
It's just gone.
Completely. When you look at the economic calculus of running an engineering team, the financial incentive to hire entry-level talent is mathematically dead.
The overhead costs are what really put this into perspective for me. I mean, if a tech company in the U.S. hires a human junior developer, the all-in cost for their first year is anywhere between, $120,000 and $150,000.
Easily. That's base salary, payroll taxes, benefits, software licenses, the whole package.
Right, but it's not just the direct cost, is it? It's the onboarding drag.
Oh, the onboarding drag is huge. It takes a junior 6 to 12 months to actually become a net positive contributor. And during that time, they are pulling your really expensive senior developers away from deep work just to answer basic questions and review simple syntax errors.
Right, so you're losing senior productivity on top of the junior salary. Now weigh that against the vibe coding alternative.
Okay, let's hear the math.
A company can outfit a tight squad of 5 highly experienced senior developers with a premium enterprise-grade AI stack. We're talking Cursor Pro licenses, GitHub Copilot, V0, Lovable, all the bells and
The
whistles.
premium stuff.
Yeah. The total cost for that software is roughly $6,000 a year total.
Wait, $6,000? So it's $150,000 for one human who needs a year of hand-holding and slows down your seniors, versus $6,000 to turn your existing 5 seniors into a hyper-productive, autonomous, code-generating army.
The velocity multiplier is just impossible to compete with. A senior developer in a 20-minute vibe coding session can now architect and deploy basic layouts, standard authentication forms, and simple unit tests.
In 20 minutes.
In 20 minutes. And those are tasks that used to consume 2 to 3 days of manual junior level labor.
That is brutal. And the labor market data really shows the immediate fallout of this math. I was looking at the sources, and since 2019, junior developer hiring in big tech has plummeted by 78%.
78%. It's staggering.
It used to be that entry-level roles made up about a third of all new engineering hires. Now it's hovering around 7%. We are seeing 6 to 7% unemployment rates for fresh computer science graduates.
Which is a historical high for that demographic.
Right. The average job search for a new grad now takes 5 to 6 months and requires sending out well over 200 applications.
It is a complete hollowing out of the middle class in tech.
Yeah.
The current generation entering the workforce is the first cohort in history that has to compete directly against multi-billion-dollar language models just for the right to perform baseline tasks.
But wait, this is where the raw data threw me a curveball, and I need you to clarify this.
Yeah.
Amidst all these terrifying statistics about junior roles vanishing, there is a prominent metric showing that entry-level job vacancies actually grew by 47% over a recent 12-month period.
Yes, I saw that too.
So how is the entry-level market dead if the postings are up? That seems like a massive contradiction.
It is a contradiction, but it's an illusion. Labor economists refer to this as the entry-level trap. And the underlying mechanism here is budget arbitrage.
Budget arbitrage, so they are essentially playing the spread on salaries.
Exactly that. Companies are still creating job requisitions with junior or entry level in the title. And crucially, they are attaching the lower $70,000 to $90,000 salary bands to those roles.
Okay.
But because AI has automated away the actual beginner-level tasks, the baseline definition of what makes an employee productive has shifted violently upward.
So they are posting a junior salary, but what are they actually demanding in the interview?
They are demanding mid-level competency. They want candidates with 3 to 5 years of experience who already possess the architectural foresight to audit an AI's output. They know a mid-level developer armed with AI can do the work of an entire junior squad. So companies are capturing mid-level productivity for entry-level compensation. The word junior no longer means a beginner who needs mentorship. It now denotes a highly efficient, autonomous AI operator.
That is wild. As one distressed developer on a career forum put it, we are the first generation that needs to be senior before we are allowed to be junior.
That is a brutal paradox.
It really is. How do you get 3 years of experience if no one will hire you for your first 3 years?
We don't. Or, well, it's incredibly difficult.
Though, if you are looking at how this is playing out globally, the data shows it is not a monolith, right? The structural shift seems highly dependent on local labor laws.
The geographic divergence is really fascinating. If you look at data from the Stanford AI Index, countries with rigid labor protections and high friction in hiring and firing, like Denmark or Germany, they saw almost zero immediate displacement from AI.
Oh, interesting.
Yeah, their laws essentially prevent companies from simply swapping juniors for software subscriptions overnight.
But in the high-speed, at-will employment markets, like the U.S. tech hubs in Silicon Valley or Austin, the displacement is incredibly aggressive.
Very aggressive. The U.S. market optimizes for short-term efficiency above all else.
Which brings us to arguably the most frustrating part of this entire phenomenon, the leadership at the top.
Yes.
Because the big tech executives driving this transition are, frankly, speaking out of both sides of their mouths.
The gap between corporate messaging and operational reality is just staggering right now. Publicly, it's all optimism. Privately, it's aggressive restructuring.
Exactly. Take Google, for instance. Sundar Pichai goes on earnings calls and assures everyone that AI is simply an accelerator, a tool to augment human talent, not replace it.
Right.
Yet the internal metrics from early 2026 show that 75% of all new code merged at Google is now AI generated.
75%.
And that is up from 25% just 18 months prior. If a machine is writing 75% of your product, you fundamentally do not need the thousands of humans who used to write that 75%.
Microsoft provides an even starker contrast, honestly.
Oh yeah, tell me about Microsoft.
So Satya Nadella champions this utopian vision where, thanks to AI, everyone is a developer.
Everyone gets to code.
Right. But simultaneously, Microsoft executes massive layoffs, 15,000 people in a single sweep, citing the crushing infrastructure and compute costs required to run these AI models.
So they fired the developers to pay for the AI that makes everyone a developer.
Exactly. Nadella frequently says AI raises the ceiling of human productivity. But in practice, it raises the floor of entry so high that a standard university graduate cannot reach it.
Wow. But the most intense ideological war over this seems to be happening inside Amazon.
Yes, the Amazon schism is fascinating.
You have CEO Andy Jassy projecting that AI will automate roughly 75% of their operations, which threatens something like 600,000 jobs.
Right.
But then right down the hall, the CEO of Amazon Web Services, Matt Garman, goes on the record publicly calling the idea of replacing junior developers the dumbest idea he's ever heard.
Garman is one of the few executives looking past the next quarterly earnings report.
Why? What is his argument?
He is pointing out a critical systemic vulnerability. If you systematically severed the talent pipeline at the entry level just to save a few $1 million today, where do your senior developers come from in 5 years?
Oh.
He warned that the entire industry is setting itself up to implode.
And if you look at the recent cybersecurity vulnerability reports, his warning is already coming true. We aren't just talking about a jobs crisis anymore. We are talking about a massive threat to the digital infrastructure that runs our banks, our hospitals, and our power grids.
Exactly.
Studies from Kaspersky and Retool show that vibe coding has birthed a terrifying new class of security flaws. And the reason why is so simple, but so scary. An AI model prioritizes working code over secure code.
That's the crux of it. The models are trained to satisfy the user's prompt as quickly as possible.
Right.
If you ask an AI to connect a database to a front-end web page, it will write a function that does exactly that. But it might hard-code the database password in plain text,
Oh my God.
or open a port that leaves the server completely vulnerable to a basic injection attack, simply because it was the path of least resistance to get a working result.
So it's fantastic at writing isolated functions, but terrible at a complex interconnected architecture.
Yes. Once a code base scales up to thousands of interconnected files, the AI loses the plot. It starts generating spaghetti code. It entirely ignores the undocumented 10-year-old business logic buried deep in a legacy banking system.
Which brings us right back to our analogy of the drones building the mansion.
Yes, exactly.
We are using autonomous drones to construct these massive, sprawling digital mansions at lightning speed. But the human architects standing out on the lawn don't actually know where the load-bearing walls are because they didn't lay the bricks.
They have no idea.
The AI built the foundation invisibly. We are creating an enormous black box.
And that black box is what engineers call the technical debt bomb.
The technical debt bomb.
Yeah. When that sprawling AI-generated application inevitably crashes during a peak load event, dropping 100,000 paying users offline, the AI cannot troubleshoot the systemic failure.
Right.
The AI cannot get on a Zoom call to calm down an angry enterprise client, and the AI certainly cannot take legal liability for a massive data breach.
Which is exactly why the job postings that do still exist aren't looking for coders anymore. They are desperately hunting for architectural guardians.
It's a great term for it.
They want safety inspectors who have the deep foundational knowledge to tear apart the AI's work, audit it, and find the structural flaws before the whole mansion collapses.
Which forces a really difficult reckoning for the education sector.
Oh, absolutely.
For the last 10 years, the promise sold to the public was incredibly simple. Pay $20,000, attend a 12-week coding boot camp, learn the basic syntax of React and Node.js, and walk out into a comfortable six-figure career.
And that promise has completely evaporated. The coding bootcamp bubble hasn't just popped, it has been obliterated.
It really has.
The placement data is so grim. Employment rates for bootcamp graduates plummeted from a high of 72% down to just 18% by 2026.
It's devastating.
Massive legacy institutions in the space, companies like General Assembly and Springboard, they simply closed their doors forever.
Yeah.
Flatiron School executed massive layoffs.
The tragedy of the bootcamp collapse is really a misalignment of curriculum versus market reality.
What do you mean?
Well, these institutions were still teaching students how to manually type out API calls and center HTML divs when the market was screaming for talent that understood AI integration, threat modeling, and system architecture.
They were teaching bricklaying in the era of laser pointers.
Exactly.
So if the boot camps are dead and the traditional junior role is a trap, what is the roadmap? If you are listening to this right now, trying to break into tech or trying to save the career you just started, what is your actual 2026 survival guide?
Well, the very first step is a psychological shift. You have to stop memorizing syntax framework.
Just stop entirely.
Do not spend your weekends memorizing the specific formatting rules of Python or CSS. The AI has perfect photographic memory of every documentation page ever written. You must shift your mindset from being the author of the code to being the editor and the architect.
And the primary skill of the editor is prompt engineering, but we need to clarify what that actually means now, because it is no longer just typing "make me a cool website" into ChatGPT and hitting enter.
Far from it.
True prompt engineering is a rigorous technical discipline, and it's why dedicated prompt engineers are pulling down $120,000 salaries.
A professional prompt engineer is essentially a systems architect who uses natural language instead of code.
Okay.
The job requires deep requirement gathering, setting strict contextual boundaries, establishing security constraints, defining state management, and iteratively guiding the model away from hallucinations.
You also have to master the foundational infrastructure that the AI consistently fails at, right?
Yes, absolutely.
The recruiters aren't looking at your bootcamp certificates anymore. They want to see that you understand systemic thinking. You need to intimately know Git version control because you will be reverting broken AI code constantly. You need to know relational database architecture. You need to know cybersecurity principles.
Because if you don't understand how the system fits together at a macro level, you will never be able to verify the micro-level code the AI generates.
This is why the survival guide explicitly recommends walking away from expensive, syntax-heavy boot camps. Instead, leverage free, project-based, open-source learning platforms.
They're so much more valuable now.
Spend your time on the Odin project or use roadmap.sh to identify the gaps in your systemic knowledge. You need to build a portfolio of real-world, complex tools where you clearly document how you used AI to accelerate your build and how you audited its output.
You have to prove you can manage the complexity, not just type the words. And to manage the complexity, you have to understand the underlying logic deeply.
Which brings me to my absolute favorite tactical tip from this entire deep dive, the concept of deliberate sabotage.
Oh, this is a great one.
If you are learning right now, use the AI to generate a block of code for you. But before you deploy it, manually go into the file, break one crucial line of logic, close the AI window, and force yourself to debug it.
Such a powerful exercise.
Trace the error messages, read the logs, and fix the broken logic entirely on your own.
It is a brilliant learning mechanism. You are using the AI as a Socratic tutor rather than a cheat code.
Right.
Because the person who just copies and pastes the answer will be replaced by the machine.
Mm-hmm.
But the person who deliberately breaks the machine to understand how its gears work, that is the person who will eventually manage the entire engineering department.
That is the dividing line. So to bring this all together, the era of manual syntax is dead and buried. The goal is no longer to learn how to write code. The goal is to possess the deep systemic knowledge required to manage the AI that writes the code and to verify exactly what it produces.
Well said.
Because if you bring zero foundational knowledge to the table and you multiply that zero by a high-speed $2 billion AI generator, your net output is still zero.
A very fast, highly confident zero.
Exactly.
But, as we wrap up, I want to pull the lens back and leave everyone with a much larger structural question.
Okay, let's hear it.
We discussed the danger of building a digital mansion with AI drones, resulting in a structure where no one knows where the load-bearing walls are. Right now, in 2026, the industry is surviving because the veteran senior developers, the people who spent the last 15 years laying bricks by hand, they are still around to spot those load-bearing walls and fix the AI's mistakes.
They are acting as the safety net.
Precisely.
Yeah.
But if the industry has decided that the financial calculus of training juniors is dead,
Yeah.
if we have permanently destroyed the entry-level training ground, what happens to the entire global digital infrastructure in 20 to 50 years?
Wow.
When this current generation of senior developers retires, the last generation that actually learned how to write software from scratch, who will be left?
That is
When a critical system fails decades from now, who will possess the deep, granular, foundational knowledge required to untangle the millions of miles of AI-generated spaghetti code that runs our hospitals, our financial markets, and our entire world?
That is an incredibly chilling thought to end on. If we don't figure out how to rebuild the pipeline, the black box isn't just going to crash the app, it's going to swallow the whole house. Definitely something for you to chew on the next time you point that laser pointer and tell the drones to start building.